Alright guys, well, welcome back. We are working now on a CJ7. It's got a 258 AMC engine in it, and we're going to do an oil pump on it. For this, we're going to have to drop the oil pan, obviously. This particular engine has a motor mount on the passenger side that you wish to God that you could flip it upside down like most motor mounts for this type of age of a vehicle, but you cannot because the oil filter's in the way. So that's the reason for the cherry picker. Now, to get started here, here's our oil pump we're going to install. And if you have the 258, it is an M as in Mary -81A. So you can see where I've got this up in the air a little bit. Here is our oil filter, and here is our motor mount. If this thing was flipped around, we wouldn't have to do this. We could just drop the pan and that one crossbar. But in this case, we're going to have to lift this and pull this motor mount because of that crossbar. So let's get up underneath and get started with the tools that we need.
Okay, so there's our motor mount. You can see where the rubber sticks out on the bottom. Not sure why that's even there, but if it wasn't there, we could flip this thing around, no problem. It looks like the only reason it's there is to stabilize up against the bottom part of the mount. So we're gonna have to pull that. But to start this process, the first thing we're gonna do is pull the starter right there. And that's gonna be a 9/16, and you're gonna have one bolt going backwards towards the tranny, and the other bolt will go forward towards the engine, which is right here on the bottom. Oh, let me get turned around here. Right there. So let me try to get back and get a better view of the bell housing. There we go. That's the bottom bolt for the starter. The other one's on the top, and it comes the opposite direction towards the back of the vehicle. So let's get both of those pulled. And of course, you know, when you're pulling a starter, always disconnect the positive or negative cable first. You don't need to pull both, just disconnect one so there's no juice possible going through here. And a lot of these older starters have some bare wire showing, and you can see right there we do have bare wire showing. So when we hang that starter down, we're going to arc somewhere. Let's get the battery cable off, let's get the starter pulled, and then we'll start on that motor mount. Okay, there's our positive cable. It's off. Now the starter. Okay, so we got the starter out of the way, just dropped it down there out of the way. Now we're going to get the motor mount. Now, on the motor mount, we have a 9/16 and a 9/16, and because it's a bolt and nut, you'll need two. You'll have to hold one side while you turn the other. And then up underneath, and don't forget about that ground strap, that's going to be an 11/16. That way we can lift the engine, we can pull this mount completely out of the way. Because if you look, see the pan is tucked underneath this, and so we have to move this mount to drop this pan. So, and remember this ground strap, when you put it back together, you're going to have all kinds of wiring problems. This ground strap is huge. It has to be there. So 11/16 nut there, 9/16 bolt and nut. Let's break those loose, lift the engine, get the motor mount out of the way. Okay, so we got the motor mount out of the way. We're going to set the starter up here out of the way now on the spring, on the leaf spring. Now we need to take this rod out that goes across in front of the oil pan. That's going to be a 9/16. You're going to want to use a deep socket probably. And so let's yank those out and drop this bar and get it out of the way, and then we can start on our oil pans. Now on the oil pan bolts, we're going to have all 7/16 bolts all the way around, except the corners. All four corners will have a 1/2 inch. So you'll need a 1/2 inch on those and 7/16 for the rest. So let's pull this bar off and let's get this oil pan out of the way. Now, prior to dropping the oil pan, I'm sure you know, but I'll say it anyway, pull your plug and drain your oil so you don't make a mess. So the next steps are pull this bar, drain your oil pan, and all of the 7/16 bolts, including the 1/2 inch bolts in the corner. Okay, so now here's our oil pump right there. We got a 9/16 bolt that we need to pull right here. I've already pulled, and another one right there. This one will be long, that one will be short. Pull both of those out, and then now the where the rod comes in for the oil pump, you'll see where the gear is twisted. When you take that out, just to kind of remember where it's located at, because it's going to be much easier to push it back in at that point. But you can always turn that with a screwdriver if needed. So when we get this out, we're pulling the screen with it. Don't try to separate this screen from it when you pull it, because you need to take this off and clean it before you install it in the new one anyway. So let's get that down and out of there. Okay, so now we got it out, and here's the new one. So at this point, you want to pull this screen off here, and that should just twist and yank out of there. And the other thing that we talked about when we were underneath the vehicle was the direction of this. It's going to make it easier to get it in. So you want to rotate the new one, and it should spin easily, to the same direction as this one. Go ahead.
just about like that. That way it slides up in there easily. Otherwise, you'll need to get in there with a flashlight and a long screwdriver or something to turn the actual stem on the distributor to line up with that hole. So this will make it much, much easier. So let's go ahead and pull this screen out now. We're going to clean it really good with brake cleaner, air pressure, anything that we can to make that thing really shine. Get every little piece of particle and dirt and debris out of there so it works better. And you can see the gears here. See how wide that is? It's skinny at the bottom and then it's wide at the top, where the new one is the same thickness all the way up. That's all the extra play that you get in these, and you don't get a lot of oil pressure when they do that. So, alrighty, let's get it cleaned up, get it separated, get it put on the new one, and get ready to reinstall it. And also, there's no gasket on here. You have a new gasket. My phone skipped there, it filled up, I had to empty it. So you have a new gasket, and the new gasket clearly is not on the pump. That means it's on the block, or on the face where the oil pump mounts to. So make sure you get that off, clean it really good. You do not want to double gasket this because it'll lose pressure there too. It won't seal properly. So, alrighty, let's get it all cleaned up, put it together, and we'll get ready to put it back on. Okay, so there we go. So the rod was really tough to get out. We had to pry it out pretty good. And you can see here where I had a tap on it. And use a cloth so that you don't dent it. It's not actually dented on the inside, just the outside a little bit. Because you don't want to restrict any flow that it needs to have. So that's all back on. It's all cleaned up. I used brake cleaner and a wire brush. Make sure that if you use a wire brush on this side of the screen that you get everything out of there. It's good to run a magnet across there too to make sure no pieces are in there. And we'll dust it off one more time before we put it up with air. Got the new gasket on. The old gasket is cleaned off of the engine where the other part went on, where we pulled it off because it wasn't with the oil pump, if you remember. So let's go poke it up in there. Alright, so there's our new oil pump bolted in with the new gasket. Now we're not going to use no RTV on this. It's on the inside of the oil pan. It doesn't need it. And you darn sure don't want any extra down inside the oil. So that's on there. So let's get our oil pan back, our oil pan bolt back on, and our oil pan back on and get that tightened up.